Hi, this is Dr. Kimberley Linert, author of Visualizing Happiness in Every Area of Your Life and host of this podcast, Incredible Life Creator Podcast. And my guest today is Miss Laurie Madock. Now, Miss
Hi,
Laurie
Dr. Kim.
Madock is a
How are you?
connector. Good.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. And just so you know, Laurie, she is a connector, agent, broker for business to business. She is a professionally trained salesperson with extensive customer service, networking, and social skills. And Laurie is a self-taught publicist and retired credit expert. She also has a music and fine arts background. Via LinkedIn, Laurie connects with a large number of executives every year to learn about their businesses, to see if she can connect them with other businesses, and she earns a prearranged commission. Laurie has over 18,000 connections. That's a lot of
Right.
connections.
It's a lot of connections. It's a lot of talking to people. Obviously, I like people.
Mm.
So it's a lot of fun actually for me. And I met you. I've met some very interesting people on LinkedIn. Even if I don't do any type of business with them, sometimes it's just interesting, as you know, to hear their stories.
That it sure is. And that's what I love about this podcast, that I get to have some amazing people on here sharing their stories. And I'd love for you to share yours. So why don't you tell us about you, where you started out, how you got to be doing what you're doing now?
Well, I grew up in a family of musicians and artists, also academics, so both right brain and left brain. So it was kind of interesting. To give you an example, as a kid, I mean, I grew up with parents who, we did arts and crafts at home. So I thought everybody did arts and crafts and that everybody took piano lessons. And so to me, they were normal type things.
Mhm.
And then I remember when I was in high school and, you were looking to choose, well, what do I want to do when I go on to college? That was a tough one for me. I ended up going for music, even though my parents were artists. I had musicians in the family. But really, I wanted to do a little bit of everything. I mean, I wanted to be a fashion designer. There were different, and so throughout my life, I've done different things. I worked in different types of sales. Public relations, I fell into with Great Dane Rescue. I kind of got sucked into rescue, I guess you could say, for Great Danes. And that ended up teaching me a lot because sales and PR are somewhat related, but they're also related to education. And my background is music education. So I like to be able to educate people. In the past few years ago, I did a few consumer advocacy shows all about educating people, how not to get scammed, what to do if you have been scammed. And I had experts like the FBI, it could be an attorney, teaching people like, here's what could happen, and here's what you can do if it's happened to you. And so throughout my life, I'm a puzzle person. I
Mhm.
like the pieces of the puzzle. So a lot of people will say to me, well, how did you end up as a credit consultant? Because that just does not seem to fit into the mix of everything else that I've done.
Mhm.
And it was kind of accidental. So at the time, I was with my first husband, and he was a realtor here. And on the team of people, they wanted someone to, teach credit. And I will tell you that actually I cried for about 3 weeks because I couldn't figure out why, when you would send letters to the credit bureaus, why they wouldn't fix it. So it kind of started up that puzzle feeling for me. And I felt like I had to master it and become an expert in it, so that I could figure out why it wasn't working the way it should. And then how can I teach people how it really works. And so I mastered that, and I helped a lot of people. And I may end up going back to it at some point. We'll see. But it's that puzzle, just like being a musician and playing piano. It's you have to know how to figure out the fundamentals, the music theory, we call it,
Mhm.
as you're learning to play. And so I guess I've done a little bit of everything. And I'm not a TV watcher, really, by any means. So I think a lot of people, they go home, they're pooped. They sit down, they eat dinner, and they lay down in front of the TV, and then they go to bed. I'm usually on my iPad, or I read a lot of books, whatever topics interest me. And it's funny, Dr. Kim, because people will say to me, "How are you so smart?" And I go, "I don't watch TV. I read." And I think that's me. That's what I like to do.
Mhm. Exciting. So puzzles and putting things together. So do you like jigsaw puzzles?
Well, jigsaw puzzles can be somewhat frustrating depending upon what that jigsaw puzzle looks like. But I've taught a lot of people and I've won a lot of bets, and I'm not a better unless I know I'm going to win. But there's a puzzle, which I will have to tell you after the show, but it has 3 dots across 3 times, and you have to connect those 9 dots with 4 lines, 4 straight lines without lifting up your pencil. And the clue that I give people, and everybody's going to now try to figure this out, how to do this. The clue I give people is you have to think outside the box.
Hmm.
And the people who are more creative will eventually figure it out. Whereas the people who are more logical, actually, they won't. They'll get stuck because they're stuck within that box. So that's an example. You want me to show you another puzzle? You'll laugh. Okay, so I'm going to have you try this. So if you pat your head up and down, right,
Okay.
and then you have circles on your tummy.
Okay.
Now what I want you to do is switch hands.
Oh,
Do
and pat my head and then rub
You're
my
pretty
tummy.
coordinated, right? Most people, when they switch, they'll do the circles up here,
Oh, yeah.
right? And there's one
Yeah.
more. And this relates more to piano, and music affects both parts of the brain. So another little one is if I take my right hand and I go forward, but I take my left hand
Forward,
and I go backwards,
like
and I
this.
can,
Wait, this one goes
yeah,
this way. This one goes
yeah,
forward, and
and
this
the other
one
one goes
goes
backwards.
backward. Oh, that one's harder for me.
That one's real hard.
That's
So
definitely harder for me.
once you master it, it's a piece
Mhm.
of cake. But most people look at me like, how did you do that? So
Uh-huh.
yes, did I have to practice it? But it's like piano. Once you've got that piece memorized, you can
Mhm.
kind of feel it, and the brain kind of puts it together. See,
Oh,
we can do
that's fun.
puzzles.
I like those fun things. My background's in vision therapy, so I do a lot with people in the therapy room and having them do something like that where they're having to move both sides of the body.
Yeah,
So
it can be challenging, I'm sure.
it really can and fun. So yeah, and then you talked about, the basics. And I think to learn anything, you've got to know the basics. So if you are good at figuring out what those fundamentals are, you could probably learn and teach anything.
Pretty much. When I originally went to school for music, I wanted to be a band director. I was in
Hmm.
music. I've been involved in learning piano and, believe it or not, saxophone.
Hmm.
This goes back to the early '70s. I should back up a little bit. So my mother's father, my grandfather, played in some of the big bands,
Hmm.
and so it kind of coordinated with a friend that I had she was 5 and I was 6, and she taught me something on piano that I can still play to this day. But I drove my parents absolutely crazy for 3.5 years, 2.5 years. I'm sorry, 2.5 years. And when I was 8.5, they got me a piano.
Uh-huh.
And so I took private lessons. And then I wanted to play in the school band. And so at this time, I'm probably maybe 8.5 or 9. And it's around 4th grade, I'm going to say. And so I wanted to play that saxophone that my grandpa had.
Uh-huh.
But no, in 4th and 5th grade, you could do clarinet. So I
Uh-huh.
hate to say I suffered. I have a lot of musician friends, but I did the clarinet
Uh-huh.
so that in 6th grade through college, I could play the saxophone. That's what I
Mhm.
wanted to do. And I wanted to become originally a band director. But while I was in college, I also was working in sales. So sales kind of took off from there. And then within a few years in my early 20s, I started teaching piano. I still have one saxophone left. I had a collection of them,
Uh-huh.
but I haven't played in a long time. But it was my favorite instrument other than piano.
Mhm. Wow. And now
Yeah,
do you still play piano or do you teach piano?
yeah. I still play piano, and I teach something called the chord method. So I also teach traditional piano. Do you play anything?
I played I haven't played in a long time either, but I played the piano, the clarinet, and the bassoon.
Ooh, bassoon, nice. Okay.
Mhm.
Well, you had to read for piano the G clef for the right hand and the bass clef for the left hand, and there's your brain trying to put those things together while you're following, the musical directions.
Mhm.
Um, I'm sorry. Continue on with the question.
Oh, so, I was
I lost
asking
it,
you, did
sorry.
you still teach? Are you still teaching? And you said you teach the chord method.
Yes, so in addition to the traditional stuff, I teach people how to play off chords off of lead sheets, or it's called fake book style. Now, I'm not an advanced jazz musician. My training was classical.
Mm,
But if you get music that has just the right hand and then it has letters over the top, and those are the symbols for chords. The traditional way is to learn all the scales on piano, what keys you're in, how many black keys are in that scale and so forth.
mhm,
But I've developed a really simple way for people that want to learn, and that's how I teach. Yes, I do still teach. I actually teach at a children's home.
mhm,
So I've got some I'm going to say very talented kids. But over the years, I've had some tremendously talented kids who can play way better than me. And if some of them have turned professional, some of them are teachers themselves, music teachers themselves. And I think that is like it chills. That's like the most inspiring thing. One of my students said to me, "Oh, I talked about you in school because when I was sick, they wanted to know, like, what made you excited when you were sick?" And the fact that I came to visit him in the hospital,
mhm.
that kind of stuff is special to me. But I could tell you lots of special stories like that. That's what really, I taught somebody how to play an instrument, but I also gave them the confidence. This is the feedback I get. They'll
Mhm.
tell me, "You gave me the confidence to go and play in the school band or to accompany a chorus." Like, the stories are just endless there, and so all of those kids from years ago when I lived in New Jersey, a lot of them are on my Facebook page. And the
Mhm.
scary part for me is, a lot of them are married now with their own kids. And I feel like, oh my gosh, how did I get so old? Because I still visualize them when they were little and they started taking lessons, you
Mhm.
know?
That is beautiful.
Yeah,
What a
a lot of fun.
legacy. What a legacy
That
for you. Mhm,
yeah, that really I would say is my legacy, and I'm fortunate that I have it because there's just something magical when you get somebody that you're teaching to an aha moment
mhm,
where you can just see them light up like, "Oh, now I got it." And it doesn't matter what subject you're teaching. I'm sure teachers everywhere would agree. When you get those kids or even adults and they understand, and then they're like, "Wow, this is not as hard." One of the things I've learned in teaching piano is never play anything difficult when you are first starting with somebody, because that can be intimidating.
mhm,
Or there are teachers who will stand up. No, you got to bring yourself down to the student's level and kind of match them. It's the same thing in sales, right? So I tend to be a fast speaker because I'm from New York Metro. But if I'm speaking to someone in Florida, I can't do this. I have to slow that tempo down so
mhm,
they don't spin their head, and they can follow what I'm saying. So it's basically, let me match you, let me analyze how you're learning. I look to see how are you learning, because not everybody learns the same way.
mhm,
So if I'm teaching a particular piece, one student might be I might have to teach them one way, but another student I might have to teach them an entirely different way. And if you played music, you'll know that some people have more of an aptitude on the hearing side,
mhm,
whereas other people like me have more of an aptitude on the reading side. Now, ideally, if I get someone who's 50-50, you've got the best of both worlds.
mhm,
Um, People who play by reading, you can kind of teach them a little bit of improvisation and how to do the chords. But when they have the aptitude for hearing, it overrides that ability a lot of times to actually learn, especially when it's a song they know,
mhm,
because they're like, "Oh, I could just figure this out by ear. I don't really need to use the music."
mhm.
So it's different for everybody. But yeah, you could tell that's my thing.
Yeah, yeah, and that's
Yeah.
beautiful because I don't care who you are, whether you're a musician or a singer or not, you know, music is so important for us as people, for our health, for our well-being, even if we're just listeners of music or appreciate music, it's just so healthy. And, I've talked about this before because of my background in the brain, but, music is one of those things that even as people are going into dementia or forgetting things, they can still remember the music. They can still play the music, which is amazing. But you can have people who are, you know, quite ill or not doing well, and you play the music that resonates with them, and it's so healing. I mean, we can go really deep into that, into frequencies and
Right.
tones, and there's so much healing and wonderful things with music.
So now I have to tell you a story. So when I used to do recitals, now with COVID, that's hard to do, but I would do them at assisted living homes. And exactly what you said is correct about people who have dementia. Um, when they recognize the songs, because I would teach a lot of older songs, back from maybe the 30s, 40s, and 50s.
Mhm.
All of a sudden, you got these seniors in their 70s, 80s, and 90s, and they're clapping along and singing. And I'll tell you, I remember the first time it happened, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, like the kids are going to freak out, because the first time I ever did a concert like that in assisted living, I didn't realize that that was going to happen.
Mhm.
And almost every concert that I've ever done, had the kids do. I did have a guy. I think he had Alzheimer's. He was a piano player in his younger years. He actually got up in the middle of the little concert while a kid was playing, and started playing and talking. And they had to actually come and say, "Oh, you need to sit down," because it got him so excited
Mhm.
that they remember all the words to all the songs. And probably the most memorable moment I had in an assisted living home, I had a young man, I'll tell you, his first name was Lewis. And at the time, maybe he was 10, 11 years old. And this was right after September 11th had happened. So this was a holiday concert a couple months later. And what he did was he put together a patriotic medley, and everybody just went crazy. I mean, the families, the people living there, it was, he just was the final end closer, and I
Mhm.
think everybody was crying at the end of that concert.
Yeah.
But those are the things that I find truly special. And
Yeah.
he's also a professional musician. Yeah,
Yeah. That is just beautiful. That is beautiful. So
thanks.
just to change subjects for a minute, we were
Sure.
talking when we came on about your Great Dane, and you did mention Great Dane Rescue. I have never owned one, but I have friends that have owned several, and I just love those dogs. They're just the sweetest. Just they're these big,
Scooby
sweet
Doo.
dogs. So talk about that, what you've been doing with that.
Well, back in New Jersey days, I got my first Great Dane puppy. And I really, from a friend, and I really didn't know much about the care. So, I'm a researcher, I look everything up. And somehow I came across what's called the Mid Atlantic Great Dane Rescue League. And at that time, we had Yahoo groups. So I'm going back now to like, yeah, end of 2001. And so I volunteered to do a transport of a dog. I'm going to tell you, I wanted to adopt the dog that I was transporting in addition to the one I already had. But the more I was on this Yahoo group, and I saw at the time, they were looking to raise funds. And I thought, well, my neighbor 3 doors down runs one of the biggest papers in New Jersey. So he loved my dog, Duke. And I went over to his house with Duke. And I said, hey, do you think maybe you could do something from the paper to help this group out? They're actually, at the time, they were in 9 states. Now they're in 8.
Mhm.
So he went, sure, I'll send a reporter over to your house. And they did a huge 2-page spread. And the rescue at that time, maybe I think had around 60 or 70 people. It wasn't a lot,
Mhm.
but it just blew up from there. And then I had my family and friends calling saying, hey, there's a lady named Sandy Levine. We recently reconnected. Her father was a veterinarian, and in New Jersey, she did Homeless Tales, it was called, and
Mhm.
she would interview different rescues. So all of a sudden, I'm getting volunteers to, go down there and do these shows. And then we also had News 12 New Jersey with Dr. Brian Voynick, who hosted a show called The Pet Stop.
Mhm.
Now, the lady who is still the president to this day, we live near each other, and we're still friends. And we used to go, and usually we took her dog, which is bigger than my dog, and we would go down to their studio, and the veterinarian would, interview us with the dogs. Well, cut forward a little bit in time, now I've been a guest on other people's shows, and in my town, there was a gentleman named Art who ran a public access station. And I called him up one day and said, "Hey, do you think you could maybe interview if I send a few people up?" And he goes, "Oh, no, no." He goes, "Better, I'll let you host the show." And I'm thinking, well, I've been a guest, so maybe I'll just think about what Sandy did and Dr. Voynick did. And so I put together a format, that had a beginning, middle, and an end. I got a bunch of volunteers to come up with their huge Great Danes. And I did this show, and Art comes out and goes, "You are the greatest host I've ever had. Do you want to volunteer to do this?" So I did it for about a year before I moved here, primarily helping nonprofits. But back to Great Danes, they are in real life like Scooby Doo. They're, I mean, a vacuum cleaner will freak out my dog.
Mhm.
The they can be, how can I explain it? They can be very regal looking. My dog will guard me. If I have a contractor come into the house and my husband is not home, I have to put him in another room because he will protect. Right, and he's 190 pounds, so he's a big dog. He will protect me. But I fell in love with the breed. Subsequently, adopted another dog, Chanel, and she passed a few years ago. And now I have Nash, who turned 9 last week.
Mhm.
So it's the bigger the dog, the shorter the lifespan is the hard part. That's the hardest part. One made it to 10, last one 10 and a half. This one turned 9. So when it does break your heart. I don't have children, and to me, it's my child. So that's how I got involved with the rescue, and I helped them for a long time. And I met a couple of the Sopranos. One of them through doing public access TV,
Mhm.
and Dre De Matteo at the time, who played Adriana, was our celebrity spokesperson for about a year.
Mhm.
So it was definitely a lot of fun, and I think the biggest thing about it was, again, if you can teach others, you don't have to do everything yourself. If you can teach other people, which is what happened with the rescue,
Mhm.
there were 9 states. I'm just helping New Jersey a little bit.
Mhm.
And so all of a sudden, all the other states are calling me up saying, "Hey, can you help us?" And I said, "Well, why don't you find me someone who is outgoing or has a little bit of sales background?" And it
Mhm.
was really simple for me to teach people because these people are so dedicated to getting dogs adopted. The
Mhm.
backside to that, though, is when you have a lot of publicity about Great Danes, is that people turn them in. So now we don't have facilities, it's all foster homes.
Mhm.
And a lot of rescues run that way. It's different than a shelter where they have a physical location. So, right now there's pretty much a crisis because there are not enough people to foster the amount of any breed of dog that's coming in. I'm sure you've probably heard some states are now no longer allowing, I think, breeders to sell, like, or not breeders, but it's pet stores.
Mhm.
They can only sell the dogs from the pound and so forth.
Mhm.
So I'd like to see more of that because, I can't imagine being a veterinarian. I mean, there's the good part, you're helping them, but
Mhm.
there's also putting them to sleep. And if you're in a shelter, I don't know how they can do that every single day and put down
Mhm.
that many dogs. And why is that even happening? But that's a whole another topic,
Exactly.
you know.
Okay.
But I definitely love my dog. I live for my dog.
Mhm.
Having a dog limits your lifestyle. I don't I don't go anywhere really for more than a few hours. I'm lucky I have a couple of friends that'll come up and pet sit if we need to go away for like a day,
Mhm.
that kind of thing. But yeah, it's definitely, a love of animals I've had since I'm little.
Mhm. Yeah, that's beautiful. And
Right.
part of this show is helping people find their passion, their purpose, and a lot of times part of that is our volunteerism, volunteering for something that we're passionate about where we can actually contribute. You want to talk about that a little bit and just
Oh
these
yeah.
feelings of
I-
helping and
Right. I mean, I get a sense of satisfaction out of helping people or animals, probably because again, having the teaching background, And like I like to research. I will say the people that volunteer are amazing, and I used to post on my Facebook quite frequently. Why don't you volunteer for something? Just out to the people on my page. Why don't you volunteer 1 hour a week? If everybody volunteered 1 hour a week, we could change the entire world. And I don't see enough people doing that, and I think that's kind of sad. That why not do something to help someone? There's so many good organizations out there. Not all of them are 501c3 nonprofits. A lot of people may have groups where they can't afford it,
Mhm.
so they're just trying to do something to better the world. And right now, I think we need a lot more volunteers in every aspect of life. There's a lot of good organizations. Do something, be the change. Don't just talk about it. Talk is cheap. If you don't take some type of action, then you're part of the problem. You're not doing anything to actually better the world.
Mhm.
And that's where I kind of get sad. Why aren't more people doing better? And not only that, but why are if I had kids, I would be teaching them from a young age what volunteering is. In all honesty, I really didn't volunteer until I was older, but there are kids who do volunteer, but maybe that's something that should be taught in the school system is volunteering and what you get out of it. And, I'm sure you've seen sometimes like kids will post, they donated instead of, they'd have a birthday party, but
Mhm.
instead of getting gifts, hey, we're gonna collect dog food, or we're gonna collect people food for the homeless,
Mhm.
and those are the kids that are going to be the people that change the world.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. And it's just, I think, just from a personal standpoint, it builds your own self-esteem.
I would
That,
agree.
you're helping other people, but especially in kids, it builds their self-esteem, their confidence. Every person needs to feel important, loved, and needed. I don't
Right.
care how young or old you are, you have to feel like you are necessary for your
Yes,
family, your community, and by volunteering, you feel that.
you do. And it exposes you to a lot of other people who are volunteering. And then it kind of becomes contagious because now you have a group that has a cause. I mean, I have a friend in New York that does paddle for a cure, where they go out on on boats, and because she's a breast cancer survivor.
Mhm.
So, she gets all the other people that have had breast cancer together and they have that momentum. And then, for example, I know a lot of people who will write books because of what they've done in volunteering. Again, those are the people that are going to change the world. Part
Mhm.
of the problem with the school systems now, though, is they don't teach volunteering. I was a credit consultant. They don't teach consumer credit. I think in Florida they're going to try to start doing that, but these kids get out of school, they have no idea,
Mhm.
what it is. Um, I don't know. I guess, again, I didn't have kids, but if I had had kids, my kids would have been exposed to music at a very, very young age. I'm going to give you actually a story. So I have a young lady named Stephanie. She's now probably, I'm going to guess, mid to late 20s.
Mhm.
And so I taught her and her brother when they were very little. The mother was a doctor. So I met them at ages 5 and 3, and they both played Suzuki violin method, which means
Mhm.
by ear. The mother told me that when she was pregnant, she would put the headphones on her belly and play classical music.
Uh-huh.
Well, if there was ever a story for like prodigies, well, Stephanie continued on and ended up going to, I believe it was Princeton, very degreed.
Mhm.
She wrote an opera. She's an opera singer. She plays violin, she plays piano, she composes, she does the whole thing. And I sit here and I go, I'm going to bet you, the 9 months of pregnancy, she's listening to this classical music, and that activates, like I said, both parts of the brain.
Mhm.
There's a lot of I've been reading a lot on music in the brain. There's a lot of expertise but difference of opinion. Some people will say, nah, it really doesn't do anything. I've been to seminars where people go through it, and yeah, there it's the right hemisphere, it's the whole brain basically just it lights up.
Hmm.
And I do believe somewhat in the Mozart effect, because Mozart music is very mathematical and uses block chords and broken chords and scales, but with a melody. And there's a certain type of order to it. Now, some composers are more wild, maybe like Franz Liszt, all over. That's more like jazz.
Hmm.
But the very, mathematical type music, I think that that does do something in the brain that makes people who play listening also, but make people who play, it's doing something to enhance their intelligence. And it's funny when I've taught piano um, to young kids, I have to explain the difference in notes in pizza pie terminology. Like
Hmm.
I'll draw little circles and half circles, and they'll understand it because I can do it either in pizza pies or I can do it using coins. And when I do that, then they understand how it works. But you've got to think outside that box, you
Hmm.
know? So, yeah,
Beautiful.
yeah.
Yeah.
Volunteer, find a cause and volunteer and do something, that will help the world.
Hmm.
Don't just complain. If you just complain, you're part of the problem.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And then talking about kids, since we're already talking about kids and music, these days the education, some parts are changing, some parts need to be changed, and kids have so many choices these days. How do we guide our kids to get on the path that they're supposed to be on? How do they find that path?
Well, that's the problem with the parents in the school system. And more so, at least with music and art in the school system. Being from the New York metro area, I can speak as to when I moved here in 2005. There's music and art in the New York metro area. It's a metropolitan area. So there's band, there's chorus, there's art classes.
Mhm.
And they sing songs, but there's really nothing here in place. And that part is because, each state has a budget, and generally sports overtakes music and art. Now, I like sports. Sports is a team type thing. You have to be a team player. In a band, you also have to be a team player if you want it to be effective. So there's something wrong to me that you don't offer the creative options and you're only offering academic options. So that brings me to college, right?
Mhm.
So when kids go on to college, your parents are like, you're going to college. You're just going to college. But back in when I went to college in the late 70s, you as a woman, it was your teacher or your secretary. No one said, hey, you could be a lawyer or a psychologist. Back then, it didn't really happen.
Mhm.
I wish it did because I might have picked something, different other than sales.
Mhm.
Uh, but kids who go to college now, they need to look up the jobs they think they're interested in and see what they pay, because that's why we're having a student debt loan crisis right now.
Mhm.
Even if people get excused in part, it's the economy is already destroyed, but now you're making it worse. It's just like the housing bubble. The point is, don't go for a career that you're going to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars for, a couple hundred thousand, whatever it is, and you're going to come out and you can't find a job, or you're going to find a $30,000 a year job, and now you have this student loan debt on your back that just keeps accruing,
Mhm.
interest, and you can't escape it. And, I have friends with kids who are teenagers, and I'll say, hey, look up what you're interested in. Then, you ready? Create a profile on LinkedIn, or that way you can find people in these fields that you're interested in. I'll give you an example. Okay, so I have a former student Um, she she would be able to look up on LinkedIn and actually talk to people and say, "Hey, I'm interested in this. What are the things that I need to know?" Maybe
Mhm.
you could find a job interning or volunteering,
Mhm.
but spend some time actually talking to somebody that is, if you're thinking of doing something, you got to take the initiative out of it. And I don't think a lot of parents think about that. They just think, hey, you're going to college and that's the end of it.
Mhm.
You can make more money in some vocations like plumbing, or electrical, than you can getting a degree and then going on for a master's. And then what if you get a doctorate in something that no one's going to hire you for? And I know people in these situations and they're still paying their student loans.
Mhm.
So I think that, you know, if the kids don't know what they're interested in, they need to start thinking about it, but the schools need to start discussing it at younger ages.
Mhm.
I've met kids who are like 10 years old and they'll tell you, "Hey, I'm going to be a doctor." And that's what they're going to do. That that's what they're going to do. But most kids, they're too involved on the phones. That's the social media problem, right?
Mhm.
Everybody on their phone. Don't get off the phone. Do you learn anything from being on the phone? No. They're not thinking about being prepared later in life. And I don't know how it is now in the school system,
Mhm.
but again, by the time you're in high school, you should have some clue as to some of the opportunities available. And maybe what the school should do is bring in people who do these different things. And then the kids might go, "Oh, that sounds really interesting. It sounds like something I could do. And hey, maybe it pays well enough that I could, pay off my student loan debt."
Mhm.
But you're asking to coordinate the school system, the government, the school system, the parents, and then the kids. And the kids seem to be like the last on the list. So
Mhm.
by the time they go to school, they're in too deep a lot of times to get out of whatever degree. And then they're stuck with that debt. And that's the hard part.
And you know all about that being in the credit repair
Well, actually,
area.
yeah. Here's the thing, though. I never did credit repair. Credit repair is primarily bogus, and I'll tell you the reason why. The majority, first off, you're supposed to be registered with the state or licensed with the state, but credit repair companies basically tell you we're going to wipe your credit clean like magic in 3 days, and you're going to have 800 credit scores. It doesn't work that way. And so if you understand how it does work, which is what I've learned, it's sharing the knowledge where you can, people think that, hey, I've got 10 bad things on my credit. I can hire a company, pay them a lot of money, and they're going to make my scores magically jump up. Sorry, not going to happen that way. There are federal and state laws that protect you and also protect those companies and the credit bureaus.
Mhm.
So I would actually teach people. So I've been referred to as credit repair, which I'm not. I've been referred to as a credit counselor, which I'm not. That's totally different. I call myself a consultant in that people consult with me. I would explain to them their situation. And then if they're hiring me, they would hire me basically as a teacher
Mhm.
so that I could teach them what they did wrong. And I'll give you the advice that my father gave me when I was 17 going off to college. And my father gave me a credit card. And he said, "You're an authorized user." Like I knew what that meant. He basically means you're tagged to a credit card I opened that
Mhm.
I'm not going to use, but you're authorized to use it. You have a limit. Here's the thing: never be late and always pay it off. Okay.
Mhm.
Now, in 43 years, I have never been late. Um, have I always paid it off? No. Have I made mistakes? Sure. When I was younger, I would open and close credit cards. Oh, better interest rate. You think
Mhm.
you're destroying your credit. So you have to know how it works. But that advice fared me well because my scores were in the 800s and I followed pretty much those two rules.
Mhm.
So, definitely coming from a teaching background, if you think that you're going to pay somebody and that they're going to send in a few letters to the credit, remember I said I cried earlier in the
Uh-huh.
show? Because I went, why doesn't this work? Well, guess what? You, the consumer, are not the customer of the credit bureau. The collection agencies and the creditors or the banks, that loan the money, They are, because they pay to subscribe. So who do you think they're going to believe? The other thing is, when you dispute something, it's all done electronically.
Mhm.
It's really no one's looking at anything. And so you send out a letter and the machine scans it, it can read the dispute. And if it's valid, or even if it's not, sometimes it pops back. So you have to learn what can you do. For me, it was very interesting because I like the law, but I'm not an attorney. So as soon as there's a hint of, hey, there's something legally wrong, like I know that this is not right, at that instant, I would automatically give my client the names of attorneys that handled cases like that, and
Mhm.
they would already have been set up because they've already sent the letters out, so
Mhm.
then they can go to the attorney, and then for the attorneys, typically those are easy cases for them to win if the client's in the right. But
Mhm.
most people have no clue how it works. uh, you know, I've had people come to me that have paid. This is a few years ago. I thought I was going to cry. I had a lady that had paid off all of her collections that were older than 7 years. The statute of limitations on most of that collection is 7 years. So after that, what happens is, if you pay it, which you didn't have to do, but again, you didn't know, then you're actually destroying your credit, because when you pay a collection, well, first off, when you get a collection, it's a big point hit. But guess what? When you got to pay that collection, if you don't negotiate for deletion or there are different markings, it's going to hit you a second time. Bam. So I was like crying when this woman called me, and I had to refer her at that point to an attorney, and who could review it and see if there was anything there. So I mean, I definitely made some good friends out of like the clients that were the great clients. They were the ones who were like said, "Hey, next thing, tell me what to do."
Mhm.
But I'm going to tell you honestly, for the most part, most people, they say they're going to do whatever it takes, and they don't do it. And so that's why I'm a high type A,
Mhm.
and the other 98 or 99% of people, are not as hyper or as high strung as I am. I operate in high speed,
Mhm.
except in Florida, of course. But yeah, I have to say that, my Florida friends, but it's
Mhm.
true. It's true. And so if you're going to commit to anything, to a career, to trying to, get your credit in the right direction, I think a lot of people they get stuck and they go, that's it. I'm done. I don't care what happens. And, on the other hand, I'm going to give you a little consumer advocacy tip, because I used to do consumer advocacy shows. There is a phenomenal website called Elliott, ELLIOTT.org. It is a consumer advocacy site where people will help you. But what's really interesting is this: if you type in Elliott.org and then the name of the company, if they're in their directory online, it will show you the corporate emails and names and addresses. So when I have a problem with, for example, the cable company, I'm not starting at the 800 number that everybody else has, because I'm not going to wait 2 hours to get to a live person. So I will go to that site, and if I can find that utility, that cable company, and then I go down and I see who are the corporate executives. I You have to do at least two. Now on Elliott, they'll tell you just one person to email. No, no, no. You need accountability.
Uh-huh.
Two people. So you copy two people on an email, and you don't get emotional. Statement of fact. This is what happened. This is what I want you to do to fix it. And here's my contact information. And most of these companies have executive response teams. And I'm going to tell you, I've gotten phone calls on Sundays,
Mhm.
which is really unusual. But some of these companies, when you get up that high, like to the president's office or the vice president's office, they don't want to hear anything bad. So they then, you go to the top and it goes down, you get it resolved much faster. You start at the bottom and have to work your way up, you're going to be crying and throwing your hands in the air. And I understand why, because there's really no customer service. Very limited companies that have phenomenal customer service nowadays. And that's sad. But on that note, I will tell you one last story. So I have a banker who is phenomenal. I had financed my car because I wanted the installment credit to show on my credit report. And the dealer originally put me with a company I won't name, but I didn't do my own homework. I didn't do my own due diligence. I didn't look them up first. And so I'm going to say there were thousands of complaints against this company. And so I used to prepay, like in advance. I would pay off a loan in half the time. Well, I never used to open up the envelopes because I already knew I was paid in advance. And one day, a few months ago, I happened to open it up and it said that I was due in like 10 days. I'm going, no, 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 I'm paid off for several months. I called this company, and what they did was they said they changed their policy. What they actually did was they unilaterally changed their contract, which they can't do, so that you can't prepay and in advance, you know. And I actually did call an attorney I knew, and he said, "You're right, but the problem is it will cost you a lot of money to fight them." And he said, "You're better off go to your own bank." So I have this banker who's phenomenal. He got me set up with the right person every time. And so, long story short, yes, I did transfer it over to this other bank. But the representative, every single time I deal with him, he's personable, he's happy, he'll do whatever it takes to help me. And that's an outstanding person.
Mhm.
I'll tell you his first name is Sebastian, just in case he watches the show.
Mhm.
But what I did was I went to the Elliott.org site and I found the vice president of this company. And I was getting ready to go over to the bank to open up a small account. I have different accounts for different purposes. And I found the vice president, and I said, I want to tell you a great story about this employee who I named, because he is the perfect example of customer service. He sets the bar because you just don't find them like this guy anymore.
Mhm.
I drive 10 minutes down the road to the bank, and I'm sitting down with him. And I said, I just want to tell you, I wrote this really nice email to you, to the vice president. And within minutes, the manager came over and said, you need to look at your email right now, like right now. And so the vice president wrote an email that basically went out to everybody at this bank talking about, hey, and he had sent me also a personal thank you. So I think that when someone helps you, and you should give them some recognition in their company, that's what helps their careers.
Mhm.
It's when you have everybody complaining, which is where we're at now. Everybody complains. You want to be a perfect example of customer service? Chewy.com, right? For the pets.
Mhm.
I'm in all the Great Dane groups. So if someone's dog passes away and they have food and you call Chewy, they send flowers, or they'll say, donate the food and we'll refund your money. One time I'm on auto ship with the Great Dane, so I get several bags of these special biscuits that he likes. And one time a bag came in moldy, and I called him up, and I actually felt bad for the customer service lady, because she's like, "Oh, I'm so sorry." She goes, "I'm so sorry that it's small." I go, "No, no, it's not your fault." She goes, "Just toss them. I'll have another bag delivered tomorrow." That is amazing customer service,
Mhm.
and I think that's where we need to get back to. How do we do it?
Mhm.
You got to be the change.
Yeah, for sure. So you are the connector, 18,000 connections. And we met on LinkedIn, and um, social media can be a wonderful thing because we met each other. I
Yes.
know when I actually meet people on LinkedIn, on Facebook, but especially like business people, I not only want to just meet them on LinkedIn, but I will always say, hey, let's have a phone call. Let's have a
Right.
Zoom call, because what's the sense of being connected to people if you don't know them or what they need? How can I actually support you, help you in your business or whatever it is you need? Or how can we collaborate on things if I don't know who you are? And so, talk about social media, how you use it as a connector. How are you using social media? How are you not using social media? How are you connecting with 18,000
Okay.
people?
Well, yeah, and I have a couple of accounts, but I will tell you that I use a very specialized marketer. My short version of the story is a few years ago, I almost just said, to heck with LinkedIn. I come from a background, years ago when I worked in outside sales, like back in my 20s, I was used to dealing with presidents of the company going down. Again, not to say there's anything wrong with the bottom going up, but it's just much easier, I find, and I can talk pretty much at any level. So I do use a very specialized marketer who gets me those connections, and I can tell him where, like, do I want local, do I want national, do I want international? I can tell him who, do I want a CEO, a CFO, a president? Um, and I can tell him what field. So, as an example, I know you're part now of my Facebook radio and podcast members group. My little test when I started with him was putting this group together. So I actually paid for something I'm not monetizing, but I found it fascinating because I would go one week, okay, let's search out nationally all paranormal radio hosts. And I would get tons of connections. And then I would say, hey, I'm putting this group together because I'm the creator and admin. And this is just for fun, like as a give back, because I had done radio for a long time and I'm not an expert in everything. Like, I can't answer technical equipment questions, but I can certainly tag people in the group who know. But that's how I started out with the marketer.
Mhm.
And then each week I would pick like a different category. And so there's probably about 750 people in the group. And I'll be honest, probably only about 10% are active. I don't know what happened to the other people, if they stopped doing shows or not. But through starting that, I've met very interesting people, a lot of people who were, experts in their field. Um, and that sort of started out that group. And I went, wow, okay, this is really like fun and easy. And so I just continued, using him. And I don't do business with every person that I speak with, but a lot, I just enjoy talking to people. I want to find out, what are they about. Most people are nice. I can tell you, like yesterday, I had someone respond back to, doing a phone call. No, like, just no. And I'm going, okay, I got to take that person off my list and block them because I don't want negative people.
Mhm.
I tend to do better with people who are multifaceted, who do different things, more towards like entertainment or public relations than than other types of businesses. It all depends. But it's like being a matchmaker. I'm a Yenta. It's a matchmaking thing. And if someone says to me, "Hey, do you know someone that does fill in the blank?" I probably do. Now I'll tell you, my mother, who's 82, always says to me, "How do you know all you have like all your friends from when you're in school moving forward and they all stay with you?" Okay. Now, people rarely make phone calls anymore. That's the other scary thing. I like to talk to my friends on the phone.
Mhm.
People are into the phone, texting, let me text you, let me messenger you, let me email you, to get a phone call now, I feel like special if somebody, calls me. But I've met some really fascinating people, and by speaking with them, it's just a further education for me, usually again in topics I'm interested in.
Mhm.
So yes, I like helping people. Yes, I like getting smarter. Actually, the tagline to my first show was "Get Smarter Faster." And that's sort of the idea. It wasn't all about, LinkedIn about making money. It was more about meeting interesting people. And if I could do something to help you, you know, then I'll help you. And if you happen to have a show of some type and you want to be in the radio and podcast members group, there's no charge. People come in. I don't even post. It runs itself most of the time.
Mhm.
Um, you know, like I said, if somebody posts and I see the post and I know who I should tag, what was really a lot of fun though was the guests, the hosts become guests on each other's shows.
Uh-huh.
So
Uh-huh.
from that formed subgroups of friends,
Mhm.
and I made a lot of friends out of that group who were truly amazing, but most of them, they do it for fun.
Mhm.
Um, would it be great to make money doing it? Yes, it's very difficult. Now, if you have enough time, I'm going to tell you about the flip side of social media, which frightens the heck out of me. You see these things like on Facebook Reels, right? Have you seen Reel?
Hmm.
I look at what's on Facebook now and I'm frightened. Like, I can't get rid of videos in my feed because 90% of them are so incredibly stupid. There's no button to block them. So you're stuck with whatever, I might have to go through 9 or 10 to get to one decent video that has something to do with like science or education or something of intelligence.
Hmm.
And so society is dumbing down on social media. Computers are great for, medicine and science. Those are the positive aspects.
Hmm.
But look what has happened now. You go out to eat and everybody's on their phone. Do you see kids playing outside? Nope, don't do that anymore. People just live on their phone, but what they're watching, when I see like young teenage girls, like, doing the I'm gonna call it the booby shake, and they're not 18, they're underage, yet they're influencers and they're making millions of dollars doing that. What are you teaching your kids by allowing them to have phones or access to that? Now, I have a friend who has three sons. I've known them for years. I don't think any of them got cell phones until they were like 18. The parents were like, nope, and I have other friends. Nope, you're not gonna see that.
Hmm.
I'm frightened. I'm frightened at what I see. And so the children now, there's got to be tremendous peer pressure. And I hate to say it, but a lot of it is about sex. And now what was there? There was some type of I don't know if it was a Facebook challenge, but something about boiling chicken in NyQuil. Like they had the ice bucket one, right? Do you
Uh-huh.
remember that?
Yes.
Now there's something about eating or boiling chicken in NyQuil. Who comes up with such stupid things?
Mm-mm.
Okay, and then Facebook will put people in jail for expressing their opinion on something, political, for example, but yet you've got these challenges that endanger people's lives, and you're not removing that. You're putting on, videos of a sexual nature of underage minors, and you're not removing that. So what does that tell you is wrong with the world? And why doesn't everybody wake up? My mother used to say when I was a kid, "Hey, if everybody else is doing it, are you going to do it too? Are you going to jump off of the roof if they're all doing that?" And it was like, no, you got to think for yourself. The
Mm.
example I give as an adult is, if I'm in a group of, there are 100 people. I'm one of 100 people, and 99 are going in one direction, and I know that that direction is wrong. I do not go with the 99 people. I would go in my own direction where my gut instinct, tells me to do the right thing. So I don't want to be one of the 99 people. So people have to wake up. I'm a senior at this point, and I'm scared for the kids of today. What's happening, and it seems like the country's going backwards. You know what? Scrap the political system. We're the United States of America. Make it one party. We're the United States. Instead, you have the red team and the blue team. It's like, when you're in camp, right? You're doing tug of war. The whole thing is totally ridiculous. It's insane. You're wasting taxpayers' money. Do something to change the system. If the people don't stand up together and somehow change that system, you know what? It's not going to get any better. It's going to continue to get worse. So please think about doing something positive, right?
Hmm. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So I want to get back to the connecting and the
Sure.
friendships. You were saying you had friends that have followed you all through life, and you have all these connections, and there are people that would just like to have one good friend. You know what I mean? So how do you
Right.
build those? How do you know so many people while still building some pretty strong, deep connections with some? How do you do that? How do you create that?
It depends on the person, but when I make the connection, um, and I get the call or the Zoom, I'm not doing it blindly. I'm actually researching. Like when we met, like I actually looked you up. I researched who you were, and I went, wow, like this person's really interesting. And so I look people up, and I guess you could say I kind of get a feel or a gut instinct from their profile. So I know if, like I said, if they're just doing one thing, not that we won't get along, but multitaskers, I think differently. I think most of us are ADHD, for lack of a better word, and you could be an expert in multiple topics, but um, I'm looking them up, I'm doing the research, and that way, when I speak with them, it sounds intelligent. I will tell you, I've probably helped more people than have helped me because I don't know that that many people actually read my profile, or maybe, most people don't read nowadays. They'll read the first few words. But I actually research the people. And so that's how I maintain the relationships with the people that I really like, that I've connected with. And some of them are really quite fascinating. In my younger years, as I would say, I'm a connector, people will go, oh, you have like, yes, this is my hair. Okay. This is my natural. I mean, other than the natural colors coming out, but this is the same hair I've had since I'm 12 years old. I get the same cut pretty much. Oh, I love your hair. And if they have thick curly hair, they're like, who is your hairdresser? So I send my hairdresser, people that have thick curly hair like mine, because it's harder to cut. And I don't know, I could tell you lots of stories, but I'm thinking of one in particular. I worked for oh gosh, this has got to be 30 years ago. I worked for a security products company, and it was almost a joke with them. And so they came to me one day, one of the guys, and said, hey, we're going to put a fishing trip together, and we want to hire a private charter bus. And we know you know everybody, so who do you know? And I
Mhm.
said, oh my God, my friend Marie, that's what her father does for a living. And they're like, no. And I went, yes. So, so they hired him to do the charter. And whenever they needed something, they would just ask me, just because I had worked in sales for so long, like from my late teens to like my early 30s, I'm going to say. Um, yeah, but the one they got me with, they said, we bet you don't know who paints the lines on the road. They got me. Okay, wait, they got me. Okay, so now I'm not working for this company anymore. Again, it's a long time ago. Skip ahead a couple of years. One of my friends, we go to her friend's house. They live on a farm in New Jersey. And oh, beautiful horses. And I go, what does the husband do? And she goes, oh, he's the contractor that paints the lines on the road. So of course, I had to call back the guys at the old place and say, "You'll never believe it," and they had a good laugh. But I don't know. I guess I'm a friendly person, and I like people who are trustworthy. Like I talk about trust, honor, respect, integrity. Be who you are. Don't I don't respect people who, lie, cheat, abuse the system. I never have. And sometimes that's a hard call because I've had people that I thought personally were good friends. And later on, something would happen, and I go, oh my gosh, this person is not really my friend. They're just using me for whatever purpose it was. And I'm not necessarily talking about men, I'm talking about women friends.
Mhm.
So I think you have to choose your friends carefully, and you have to research people. And, that's how you find, I mean, almost everything's on the internet nowadays.
Mhm.
So you read about all the scams, and, I guess I'm just so tired of, the scam stories. And people will come to me and say, well, what do I do? There's a group here on Facebook in Florida called Florida Attorney Advice, where attorneys and non-attorneys who identify themselves as non-attorneys will give advice to people. And sometimes I'll see like a credit one, and I'll write non-attorney, retired
Mhm.
credit expert, that type of thing. But the postings that I see are like heart-wrenching when people are ripped off of a lot of money, a lot of money. I could tell you some horrible stories from when I hosted my show. And I remember interviewing an FBI agent, and this goes a few years back. And I said, why don't you guys do anything, about these scams? One of my neighbors, her Mother was ripped off for $130,000 because a scammer got into her computer and she was purchasing a home. And this is actually pretty common now. And on the title paperwork or wherever they had the wiring number, went in and changed it. So when she went to the bank and wired the money, she lost all the money to Nigeria and couldn't get it back. That's why I asked the FBI agent, I gave him some examples. He goes, we don't have enough people. We don't have enough people to go after the scammers. But this poor lady must have been in her 70s. The mother was in her 70s. And to lose that kind of money, what can you do? And now there's a lot of crime everywhere. And, my mom is 82. I mean, she's been hijacked on her computer 3 times where they've, locked it down. She does no banking online, thank God. But I tell her, if you even suspect that, if you have one split second of, I'm not sure what this is, delete, just totally delete. One time she sent me an email. It was about her credit scores. I said, Mom, did you look at the email it came from? I remember it was a crazy chef girl. It was people don't look. If I get calls that I don't recognize, Google it. A lot of times it'll tell you if it's a scam, but you have to be really careful nowadays.
Right. Yeah, I see where your background in your show comes into play right here with all this information you have. So,
Yeah,
but
well, my first show was called the Half Empty, Half Full Consumer Advocacy Show, which I kind of liked. I know people thought it was weird, but half empty was the negative, the half full was the positive. And that was the premise of the show on all different types of fraud. And then after that, I did a variety show. But then I did one I co-hosted with an attorney called Fraudsters. Same basic premise, though, was people would call me almost like I'm an attorney because I know everything. And I don't know everything, and I can't legally solve your problem, but I probably know someone who can help you. And so, for example, if you're a victim of cybercrime, if you actually Google report cybercrime, I think it comes up with the FBI's website, and you can report cybercrime. All it takes is putting together a few keywords, and usually there's an agency that will pop up, and you can contact that agency. But whether or not they're going to help you or how much they're going to help you, depends on the agency.
exactly. So I want to change the subject again and just ask you a personal question. What gives you the most happiness and fulfillment in your life at this point?
Well, I mean, I'm going to say, teaching piano, yes, definitely gives me happiness. Finding the right guy who is totally amazing. And of course, having the almost perfect, I say almost perfect, Great Dane, because he's got a brown eye and a blue eye. Those are the things that fulfill me. Helping others fulfills me. And, I like the positive, and I think you have to stand up for yourself. If you've been wronged or somebody's been wronged, don't be a bully. That bothers me, especially for kids who are bullied, because I know kids who have been bullied. But yeah, I would have to say my relationship really is like I said, I'm married to an incredible guy who I love madly. And the dog loves him more, I'll confess. The dog loves him more than me, but that's okay. That's okay.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being on the show today and sharing all your wisdom and advice. And it's been amazing. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Dr. Kim. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah. So I have one last question before we finish. What is your best advice on living an incredible, amazing life?
I would have to say, um, because I know I can go off to the negative side, and it is to try to switch your mind frame or reframe things to the positive. So, I have, I don't really bring up often, but I have some medical issues that have been a challenge in the past. You get to a level of acceptance. I could either say, oh, I'm going to drop dead tomorrow, or I'm going to learn to adapt to what I have to deal with, and look at things in a more positive way. Because if you think negative all the time, then that's where you're going to go. You're going to drop dead. If you tell yourself I'm going to die, you're going to die. If you tell yourself I'm going to live and figure out how to adapt, then I think that would be my best advice.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yes, and we'll
A lot
talk
of
to you
fun.
again soon. Okay.